Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
When my stepsister took my inheritance through a court battle, I didn't react the way she expected. She thought she'd won, but as she basked in her victory, I simply smiled and said, "Check your mail tomorrow." What she found the next day left her completely stunned, and it was only the beginning. It all began in the days following my father's passing. His death was a devastating blow, and I spent those first few weeks in a fog of grief. My father had been the anchor of my life, a man of principle who worked tirelessly to ensure that both Erica and I were provided for, even after his marriage to her mother ended years ago. When the will was read, I felt a bittersweet sense of closure. My father had been clear and fair. The estate would be split equally between me and Erica. The family home, where we had both grown up, and the savings account he had carefully nurtured over decades were to be divided, honoring the connection we both shared with him. I thought Erica would feel the same. Sure, we weren't close. Our relationship had always been tense, but I believed we could put our differences aside to honor our father's memory. I was wrong. It started with a curt email barely a week after the will's reading. Erica informed me that she would be contesting the will in court. Her reasoning? She claimed that, as my father's primary caregiver, she deserved the entire inheritance. Her words dripped with condescension. "You weren't there for him like I was. I gave up so much to take care of him while you lived your life elsewhere. He would have wanted me to have everything." I was furious. Erica was twisting the truth to suit her narrative. While it was true that she lived closer to him, her involvement in his care had been superficial at best. I was the one who handled his medical bills, made sure his appointments were scheduled, and spoke with his doctors regularly. I might not have lived in the same city, but I was as involved as I could be. Her audacity to claim otherwise was infuriating. Worse, it felt like a betrayal, not just to me, but to our father whose wishes were now being trampled on. Court dates were set, and the battle lines were drawn. I gathered every piece of evidence I could to prove my involvement in my father's care. There were receipts for travel expenses, emails discussing his treatment plans, and even messages from my father thanking me for everything I had done. But Erica wasn't backing down. She painted herself as a selfless daughter who had sacrificed everything for our father's well-being. She claimed I had been absent, showing up only when it was convenient for me, while she bore the brunt of the emotional and physical burden of his care. Her performance in court was almost convincing. She cried as she recounted her version of events, her voice cracking as she described how lonely and overwhelmed she had been in those final years. Her lawyer was sharp, spinning her story into a compelling argument for why the inheritance should belong solely to her. I sat in the courtroom, seething as I listened to her lies. This wasn't just about money. It was about honor, about respecting our father's legacy. And Erica was dragging it through the mud. When the judge finally ruled in her favor, I felt a crushing sense of defeat. Erica had won. The family home and the savings account were hers, and I was left with nothing but my frustration and anger. As we left the courtroom, she smirked at me, her smugness practically radiating off her. "Better luck next time," she said, her voice laced with mock sympathy. But I didn't rise to her bait. Instead, I took a deep breath, forced a calm smile, and said, "Check your mail tomorrow." Her smile faltered for just a moment, but she quickly recovered. "Whatever," she said, brushing me off as she walked away. Little did she know, I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The courtroom felt like the setting for a twisted drama, and Erica was undoubtedly the star of the show. She arrived in somber attire, clutching a tissue as if she were on the brink of tears, a carefully constructed image of grief and sacrifice. Her lawyer, equally polished, began spinning a story that painted her as the devoted daughter who had given up everything for my father's well-being. She was there for every doctor's appointment, he declared, pacing in front of the judge. She provided emotional and physical support during the most challenging years of her father's life. Meanwhile, the other heir, he gestured vaguely in my direction, as though I were an afterthought, was largely absent, contributing little to his care. I bit my tongue to keep from shouting. His version of the story couldn't have been further from the truth. Erica's sacrifices were nothing more than empty gestures, the kind of performative acts that looked good on the surface, but lacked any real substance. Yes, she lived nearby, but her visits were infrequent, her support superficial at best. When it was my turn to speak, I fought to keep my emotions in check. My lawyer and I had worked hard to gather evidence, emails, receipts, and even a letter from my father thanking me for the role I played in managing his care. My father was clear about his wishes. I began, my voice steady. He wanted his estate to be divided equally because he valued fairness and believed that both of us contributed to his life in meaningful ways. I laid out the receipts from my visits, the countless emails coordinating his medical care, and the payments I had made toward his medical bills. I even presented a letter he had written to me, expressing gratitude for my unwavering support. This isn't about proximity or physical presence, I said. It's about honoring my father's wishes and the relationship we both had with him. The judge nodded, but I could tell that Erica's narrative had already taken root. Her lawyer seized on minor inconsistencies, such as gaps in my travel dates, twisting them into evidence of my supposed neglect. Meanwhile, Erica dabbed at her eyes with her tissue, occasionally glancing at the judge with a carefully rehearsed look of anguish. By the time the judge rendered the decision, I had a sinking feeling I knew what was coming. When he ruled in Erica's favor, awarding her the entirety of the estate, I felt a wave of anger and disappointment crash over me. It wasn't just about the money. It was about my father's legacy, his clear wishes, and the justice that had been denied. As we left the courtroom, Erica was practically glowing with smug satisfaction. She didn't even bother to hide her triumphant smirk. "Better luck next time," she said with a mockingly sweet tone. But I wasn't about to let her gloating get the better of me. I took a deep breath, forced a calm smile, and said, "Check your mail tomorrow." Her smirk faltered for just a moment before she brushed me off. "Whatever," she muttered, walking away. What Erica didn't know was that I had already anticipated this outcome. I had been playing the long game, quietly gathering evidence of her dishonesty and preparing for what came next. Tomorrow's mail would be the beginning of a battle she wasn't ready for. Erica had been basking in her courtroom victory, completely unaware of what was coming next. While she gloated about her win, I had been meticulously working behind the scenes, preparing for this exact moment. The next morning, as I sipped my coffee, I imagined her reaction when she checked her mail. I knew the legal summons waiting for her would come as a complete shock. She probably thought her victory in court was final, that I had rolled over and accepted her lies. She couldn't have been more wrong. The summons accused her of fraudulent claims and misrepresentation during the inheritance case. The evidence I had gathered painted a very different picture from the one she presented in court. Emails, bank statements, and testimonies from those who had witnessed her limited involvement in my father's care were now part of a growing case against her. That afternoon, I got the call I was expecting. "What the hell is this?" Erica's voice was shrill and panicked. "You lost. Why can't you just accept it and move on?" "Because you lied," I said calmly, "and I'm not letting you get away with it." She scoffed, but there was a nervous edge to her tone. "This is ridiculous. You're wasting everyone's time and money. The court already ruled in my favor." "That was before I had the chance to show the whole truth," I replied. "You wanted to play dirty? Erica, now is my turn." She launched into a tirade, accusing me of being vindictive, petty, and obsessed. I let her rant, remaining silent until she finally ran out of steam. "If you're so confident," I said, "then you have nothing to worry about. Let's see how this plays out." After hanging up, I took a moment to reflect on how far I had come since this ordeal began. At first, I had been angry and reactive, blindsided by her betrayal. But now I was in control. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. My father's legacy deserved to be protected, and I wasn't going to let Erica distort the truth without consequences. Meanwhile, Erica was scrambling. Over the next few days, I heard from mutual acquaintances that she was devastated by the lawsuit and didn't understand why I couldn't just let things go. She claimed I was dragging the family through unnecessary drama and painted herself as the victim of my supposed obsession. What she didn't know was how much evidence I had gathered against her. Bank statements showing withdrawals from my father's account that coincided with her luxury vacations. Emails between her and her friends bragging about how easy it was to manipulate people. Testimonies from neighbors who confirmed that her visits to my father were infrequent and brief. Erica had underestimated me, assuming I would fold after the first loss. But now, she was about to learn just how serious I was. As I prepared for the next legal battle, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about winning. It was about ensuring that the truth came to light. And this time, Erica wouldn't be able to hide behind her lies. Preparing for the second legal battle was like peeling back the layers of a story I thought I already knew. But the more I dug into Erica's actions during my father's final years, the clearer it became that her deceit ran much deeper than I had initially thought. The first major breakthrough came when my lawyer and I obtained access to my father's financial records. At first glance, they seemed straightforward. Regular bills, medical expenses, and a modest spending pattern that reflected his careful budgeting habits. But then, there were the withdrawals. Large sums of cash taken out at irregular intervals, all signed off by Erica under the guise of helping with his expenses. When we cross-referenced the dates of these withdrawals with her social media posts, the truth became glaringly obvious. The money wasn't going toward his care. It was funding her lavish lifestyle. There were pictures of Erica lounging on tropical beaches, shopping at high-end boutiques, and dining at five-star restaurants, all while my father struggled to pay his medical bills. My lawyer couldn't hide his excitement as we reviewed the evidence. "This is exactly what we needed," he said, tapping the highlighted withdrawals in the bank statements. It not only discredits her claims of being a devoted caregiver, but it also shows clear financial exploitation. Encouraged by this discovery, I decided to dig even deeper. I reached out to my father's old neighbors, many of whom had witnessed Erica's interactions with him firsthand. What they told me painted a very different picture from the one she had presented in court. She'd show up every now and then, one neighbor said, shaking her head. She'd bring groceries or run an errand here and there, but she was hardly around. It always seemed like she was doing the bare minimum to look good. Another neighbor recalled how Erica often made a big show of her visits. She'd park her car right out front, carry in a bag or two of groceries, and then leave after an hour. She'd wave at everyone like she was some kind of hero, but most of us knew it was just for appearances. I also found emails and text messages between Erica and mutual friends, some of which were downright incriminating. In one exchange, she joked about how easy it was to keep up the facade of being a dutiful daughter. "As long as I post a few pictures of Dad and me, everyone thinks I'm an angel," she wrote. In another, she bragged about convincing my father to let her handle his finances. "He's so trusting," she had written. "It's almost too easy." Every new piece of evidence felt like another nail in the coffin of her lies. It was infuriating to think about how much she had gotten away with, but it also fueled my determination to see this through. When I presented all of this to my lawyer, he leaned back in his chair, a satisfied smile on his face. "This isn't just about misrepresentation anymore," he said. "We're looking at a clear case of financial abuse. She's going to have a hard time explaining this in court." As the evidence piled up, Erica's carefully constructed image of the selfless daughter began to crumble. It became clear that her court victory had been built on lies, and I was ready to expose the truth for everyone to see. But I knew Erica wouldn't go down without a fight. She had already shown how far she was willing to go to secure the inheritance, and I suspected she would try to undermine my case in any way she could. Still, I wasn't afraid. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt like I had the upper hand. The truth was on my side, and I was determined to make sure it came to light. Erica had underestimated me, assuming that her lies would be enough to win. But as we prepared for the next round in court, I knew one thing for certain. This time, justice would prevail. As the court date drew closer, Erica's once unshakable confidence began to falter. Her bravado, which had been on full display after her initial victory, was replaced with a noticeable tension. Mutual acquaintances told me she was stressed out and worried about the lawsuit, though she tried to play it off as nothing serious. I knew better. The evidence we had gathered was damning, and Erica was starting to realize just how much trouble she was in. Her panic became evident when my phone rang late one evening, her name flashing on the screen. "Hello," I answered cautiously, already suspecting what this call was about. Her tone was uncharacteristically soft, almost pleading. "Look," she began, "maybe we don't have to do this. We don't have to drag the family through another court case." I leaned back in my chair, waiting for her to get to the point. "What are you suggesting?" "I've been thinking," she said, her voice dripping with an insincere sweetness that I knew all too well. "How about I give you a portion of the inheritance? We can settle this between us. No lawyers, no drama." I couldn't help but laugh. "Why now, Erica? You weren't interested in splitting it when we were in court the first time. You fought tooth and nail to keep everything for yourself." She hesitated, then let out a sigh. "I didn't realize how much this was hurting you," she said, her tone carefully calculated to sound sincere. "I just want to make things right." Her words might have fooled someone else, but I wasn't buying it. "This isn't about me," I replied firmly. "It's about justice for Dad. You lied, Erica. You exploited him, twisted the truth, and tried to erase his final wishes. This isn't something we can sweep under the rug." She tried again, her desperation becoming more evident. "Come on, we're family," she said. Do you really want to drag this out in court? Think about what it'll do to everyone else. I could hear the thinly veiled panic in her voice, but I wasn't going to let her guilt trip me. You weren't too worried about the family when you decided to lie and take everything for yourself, I shot back. So don't pretend you care about anyone but yourself. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before she finally spoke again. Fine, she snapped, dropping the act. If you want to waste your time and money on this, go ahead. But don't say I didn't try to make peace. See you in court, I said, hanging up without another word. Despite her attempts to sound confident, I knew Erica was unraveling. The mounting evidence against her was too overwhelming to ignore, and she was scrambling to find a way out. But I wasn't going to let her off the hook that easily. This wasn't just about money or the inheritance. It was about standing up for what was right and ensuring that my father's legacy wasn't tainted by her greed. As I prepared for the upcoming trial, I felt more determined than ever. Erica might have thought she could talk her way out of this, but the truth was on my side, and I was ready to see justice served. The courtroom was tense, filled with a palpable energy that made it clear this trial was not going to be a repeat of the first. This time, I had the evidence to back up my claims, and I wasn't going to let Erica's theatrics overshadow the truth. As we sat waiting for the proceedings to begin, I glanced over at Erica. Her confident demeanor from the first trial was noticeably absent. She fidgeted with her hands, avoided eye contact, and whispered hurriedly to her lawyer. I couldn't help but feel a sense of validation. She knew she was in trouble. When the judge entered and the trial officially began, my lawyer wasted no time laying out the case. He started with the bank records, presenting the withdrawals Erica had made from my father's account. The timing of these transactions is telling, he explained, pointing to a timeline. Each large withdrawal coincided with personal expenses, luxury vacations, high-end shopping sprees, not with any medical or household needs. The judge's expression hardened as he examined the evidence. Erica's lawyer tried to argue that the withdrawals were for unforeseen expenses related to my father's care, but the lack of documentation made the excuse fall flat. Next, my lawyer presented the testimonies from my father's neighbors and friends. Each one painted a consistent picture of Erica's limited involvement. She would show up occasionally, usually for short visits, one testimony read. She was more interested in making a show of being there than actually helping, but the most damning piece of evidence came from my father's lawyer. In a letter written just months before his passing, my father explicitly stated his intentions for the inheritance. I want my estate to be divided equally between my two children, the letter read. Both have contributed to my life in meaningful ways, and this decision reflects my love and gratitude for them both. The judge listened intently as the letter was read aloud, nodding slightly as if to confirm what we already knew. My father's wishes had been clear, and Erica's actions were a betrayal of that clarity. When it was Erica's turn to testify, the cracks in her story became glaringly apparent. My lawyer's cross-examination was relentless but fair, focusing on the inconsistencies in her claims. Ms. Erica, he began, holding up the bank statements. Can you explain why these large withdrawals, supposedly for your father's care, align with luxury expenses that benefited only you? Erica stammered, her composure slipping. It was complicated, she said. Sometimes I needed a break. Caring for him was stressful, and I used the money to recharge. Recharge, my lawyer repeated, raising an eyebrow. So you admit these expenses were for personal use? Her lawyer objected, but the damage had already been done. As the questioning continued, Erica's facade crumbled further. When pressed about her exaggerated caregiving claims, she finally admitted, I might have overstated things. But it's not like I wasn't there for him. The judge's gaze hardened, his patience clearly wearing thin. By the time she stepped down, it was clear her case was unraveling. The closing arguments solidified the stark contrast between the two sides. My lawyer emphasized the overwhelming evidence of Erica's financial exploitation and her disregard for our father's clear wishes. Erica's lawyer, meanwhile, clung to vague defenses, attempting to portray her as a stressed caregiver who had made a few mistakes. As the trial ended and the judge prepared to deliberate, I felt a mix of nerves and quiet confidence. This time, the truth was undeniable. Erica had lied, exploited, and betrayed our father's legacy, and now she was finally being held accountable. When the judge returned with his verdict, the courtroom fell silent. His voice was steady as he ruled in my favor, declaring Erica's actions fraudulent and ordering her to return the inheritance she had wrongfully claimed. For the first time in months, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Justice had prevailed, and my father's legacy had been restored. Erica, meanwhile, sat frozen, her face pale as the reality of her defeat sank in. This battle was over, but I knew the fallout was just beginning. The courtroom was silent as the judge began reading the verdict, his voice echoing off the walls. After reviewing the evidence presented, he began, "It is clear that the defendant, Ms. Erica, engaged in fraudulent behavior by misrepresenting her involvement in the care of the deceased and exploiting financial resources for personal gain." Every word was a hammer, each syllable driving home the weight of her wrongdoing. Erica, who had sat through the trial with feigned composure, now looked as though the air had been sucked out of the room. Her once confident smirk was replaced by a pale, wide-eyed expression of disbelief. The judge continued, "The court hereby rules in favor of the plaintiff. Ms. Erica is ordered to return the inheritance she wrongfully claimed, including assets from the family estate and monetary funds. Additionally, she will be responsible for covering the plaintiff's legal fees." I felt a wave of relief wash over me as the words sank in. This wasn't just a win for me. It was a victory for my father's memory, for the values he had always stood for. I glanced at Erica, who sat frozen, her hands gripping the edge of the table as though it were the only thing keeping her upright. Her lawyer leaned in to whisper something to her, but she shook her head, her eyes fixed on the judge as if hoping he would suddenly change his mind. He didn't. "This court is adjourned," the judge said, standing and exiting the room. The gavel's sharp crack signaled the end of a battle that had consumed months of my life. As people began to file out of the courtroom, I stood, my legs shaky but steady enough to carry me out with my head held high. Erica, on the other hand, seemed rooted to her seat, her face drained of color. Outside the courtroom, the air felt lighter, as though the tension of the past months had finally dissipated. Erica exited shortly after me, her steps slow and hesitant. For a moment, I thought she might try to say something, but she avoided my gaze entirely, walking past me without a word. I didn't feel triumphant, not in the way I had imagined I might. This wasn't about gloating or rubbing her defeat in her face. It was about justice, about ensuring that my father's wishes were honored and that his legacy wasn't tarnished by greed and deceit. As I stood on the courthouse steps, I thought about everything that had led to this moment, the lies, the betrayal, the sleepless nights spent preparing for this fight. It had been exhausting, but now, with the verdict in hand, I felt a sense of closure. Justice had been served, and my father's voice, silenced by Erica's actions, had been heard once more. This chapter of my life was over, and though the scars of this ordeal would remain, I knew I could finally move forward. Erica had taken her shot, and she had lost. Now, it was time for her to face the consequences. The aftermath of the trial rippled through our family like a storm. It didn't take long for word to spread. Erica's fraudulent actions and the court's decision were the main topic of conversation at every family gathering, phone call, and message thread. Some family members were stunned, expressing disbelief that Erica had stooped so low. "I can't believe she would do something like that," one relative said during a group call. "I always thought she was a bit self-centered, but this is next level." Others weren't surprised at all. "Honestly, I saw this coming," my aunt admitted. "She always had that me-first attitude. I just didn't think she'd go this far." Erica, meanwhile, tried to control the narrative. She went out of her way to frame herself as the victim, calling family members to sob about how unfair the trial had been. "I wasn't lying," she insisted. "I was just misunderstood. And now, everything's ruined because of that lawsuit." But her attempts to garner sympathy fell flat. The evidence presented in court was too damning, and no one could ignore the undeniable proof of her deceit. Her reputation, once carefully curated, was now in shambles. At family gatherings, she became the subject of hushed whispers and side glances. Relatives who once welcomed her with open arms now kept their distance, unsure of how to interact with someone who had tried to steal from her own family. I caught wind of some of her more desperate attempts to save face. She told one relative, "I only did what I did because I was under so much stress." To another, she complained, "It's not my fault. I just thought I deserved more after everything I went through." But no one was buying it. Her lies had been exposed, and the mask she wore for years had finally slipped. As for me, I focused on rebuilding my life. The inheritance, now rightfully mine, wasn't just a financial windfall. It was a symbol of my perseverance and my father's legacy. I used the money to secure my future, investing in things that mattered to me. I paid off debts, set up a savings account, and even took a long overdue vacation to clear my mind after the grueling legal battle. But beyond the practicalities, the victory was deeply personal. It wasn't just about the money. It was about standing up for myself and for my father's wishes. For too long, I had let Erica's manipulations go unchecked, but now, I had proven to myself that I was capable of fighting back. The family dynamic would never be the same, and that was okay. I didn't need everyone's approval or affection. What mattered was that I had done the right thing, even when it was hard. Erica might have tried to frame me as the villain in her story, but I knew the truth, and so did everyone else. And that truth, in the end, was enough. In the quiet weeks after the trial, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. What had started as a devastating betrayal by someone I once considered family had become a defining moment in my life. Erica had underestimated me from the start. She assumed I would accept defeat, that I would let her lies and manipulation go unchecked. Maybe in the past I might have. There had been times when I chose to avoid conflict, convincing myself that it wasn't worth the fight. But this wasn't one of those times. This battle wasn't just about the inheritance. It was about standing up for what was right, even when it was uncomfortable, exhausting, and uncertain. My father had always believed in fairness and justice, instilling in me the values that guided him through life. He taught me that integrity wasn't negotiable, that doing the right thing mattered, even when it was hard. Fighting for his wishes wasn't just about money or property. It was about honoring the principles he lived by and ensuring his legacy wasn't tarnished by greed. Every decision I made during this ordeal was guided by the thought of what he would have wanted. Looking back, I realized how much I had grown throughout the process. I had gone from feeling betrayed and powerless to finding strength and resilience I didn't know I had. I had learned how to navigate the complexities of the legal system, how to remain composed under pressure, and, most importantly, how to stand firm in the face of adversity. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I doubted myself, when the weight of it all felt overwhelming. The thought of giving up crossed my mind more than once. But every time I considered backing down, I thought of my father and the lessons he had taught me. Quitting wasn't an option. Erica's actions had been a painful reminder that not everyone operates with the same values. But her betrayal had also shown me the importance of boundaries and self-respect. I had allowed her to cross lines for years, brushing off her manipulative behavior to keep the peace. This ordeal made it clear that peace built on silence and compromise isn't real peace, it's avoidance. Justice wasn't easy. It required patience, determination, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths. But it was worth it. The verdict wasn't just a win for me. It was a validation of everything my father believed in. It was a reminder that standing up for what's right, even when the odds seem stacked against you, is always worth it. As I moved forward, I carried that lesson with me, vowing to never again let fear or doubt hold me back from fighting for what mattered. My father's legacy was intact, and so was my resolve. I had proven to myself, and to Erica, that I wasn't someone to be underestimated. Justice had been served, and the truth had prevailed. That, above all, was what mattered. In the months following the trial, my life began to settle into a calm I hadn't experienced in years. The weight of the inheritance dispute and the emotional toll of fighting for justice had finally lifted, leaving me with a newfound sense of peace and clarity. With the inheritance now in my hands, I was able to focus on dreams I had long put on hold. I used part of the funds to pay off lingering debts, which brought an incredible sense of relief. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was treading water just to stay afloat. I set aside another portion for investments and started planning for my future in a way that felt purposeful and exciting. One of the first indulgences I allowed myself was a trip to Italy, a place my father had always dreamed of visiting but never had the chance. As I stood under the Tuscan sun, I felt closer to him than ever. The trip wasn't just about exploring a beautiful country. It was a way of honoring his memory and the values he passed on to me. Cutting ties with Erica was another decision that brought unexpected peace. After the trial, there was no doubt in my mind that our relationship was irreparably broken. Even if she had apologized, which she didn't, I knew I couldn't allow someone so manipulative and deceitful back into my life. Initially, there were whispers from other family members, some urging reconciliation, others supporting my decision. "You're better off without her," one cousin told me. "She's shown her true colors, and you don't owe her anything." Still, part of me mourned the relationship we might have had. We grew up together, shared childhood memories, and we're supposed to be each other's family. But Erica had chosen greed and lies over honesty and respect, and I couldn't overlook that. Protecting my peace meant letting go of people who didn't value it. Looking back, I don't regret the battle, even though it was one of the hardest experiences of my life. Standing up to Erica and fighting for what was right wasn't just about protecting my father's legacy. It was about proving to myself that I was capable of more than I thought. The ordeal reminded me of my strength and resilience. It forced me to confront difficult truths and taught me that sometimes the hardest battles are the most necessary. Erica may have thought she won when the first court ruling went in her favor. She probably expected me to walk away, defeated and broken. But in the end, the truth prevailed. Justice was served, and my father's memory remained untarnished. Today, I carry the lessons of that experience with me. My life is quieter, freer, and filled with possibilities I hadn't dared to dream of before. The inheritance wasn't just a financial windfall. It was a symbol of perseverance, a reminder that doing the right thing is always worth it, no matter how difficult the road may seem. I don't dwell on Erica's actions anymore. Instead, I focus on the future, on living a life that would make my father proud. His values guide me every day, and for that, I'm grateful. Erica may have tried to rewrite the story, but the truth stood firm. And in the end, that's all that matters.